Here's today's First Word Daily Devotion.
On November the 8th, we enter Lamentations this morning, Lamentations chapter 1, and the book of Lamentations is exactly what it sounds like. It is a lament. It's a lament for the house of the Lord. It's a lament for the people of God. It's a lament because the people have been carried into exile. And so Lamentations is a book authored by Jeremiah. And in particular, remember, he was a weeping prophet. And the reason for his weeping was because his message was a message of sadness. The people were going to be carried into exile. But not only was he a weeping prophet because of his message and how it was received, he was a weeping prophet because his sticking to the word of the Lord, his faithfulness to the word of the Lord, cost him personally. He was thrown in a cistern. He was put in a blockade. He was mocked and ridiculed. And here is Jeremiah still being faithful, because he says, "Woe is me if I do not proclaim, thus saith the Lord." And he heeded that warning all through his life. And that's a warning that God kept before him. Woe is you, Jeremiah, if you don't tell exactly what I say you to say. And so verse 13 then of Lamentations chapter 1 is really a reference to his call. From on high he sent fire into my bones. That's a reference again to his call. He made it descend. He spread a net for my feet. He turned me back. He has left me stunned, faint all the day long. And so there again is a reference to Jeremiah's call and how this word of the Lord, this costly ministry of the prophet. And we're to remember that in our day and age. The word of the Lord is not very well received, although we sure wish that it would be. It's a word of hope. It's a word that has an undercurrent of steadfast love, and we sure hope that it would be received, but oftentimes speaking the truth in love comes with ridicule, and so we remember these things. Look at verse 16. For these things I weep. My eyes flow with tears, for a comforter is far from me, one to revive my spirit. My children are desolate, for the enemy has prevailed. And so here we enter this book of Lamentations. It's going to be a rich book. It's not a book, and remember, it's not a book that we should easily pass by, because it, of course, is inspired by God and profitable for teaching, for correction, for reproof, so that we may be equipped. And speaking of being equipped, let's turn to James. James is one of the most practical books in the whole Bible. And here in November, we get to turn our attention, before we get into some difficult passages like Ezekiel and Revelation and Daniel. Those books are coming. Those are challenging books, and so give us a break from some of the challenge. Let's get to the very practical. James chapter 1, just the first 18 verses. We'll read probably through verse 8 and make some comments. Look at verse 1. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, who is this James? James was the brother of Jesus Christ. He was, we should say, be specific, he was the son of Mary and Joseph. Remember, Jesus was born of a virgin, and so James is his half-brother, we should say. Of course, he is the son of Mary and Joseph. Of course, Jesus doesn't share the bloodline from Joseph, even though he's an adopted son. So James is a servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ. And this is important for us to remember, because you remember James, of course, was one of the brothers of the Lord who rejected him at first, but something changed. And what was it that changed for James? I'm guessing that it was the resurrection. And I think that we can hold that with clear evidence. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes in the dispersion. Now look at that language. How is he greeting the church? He's greeting the church by using the moniker of the 12 tribes of Israel. And then he's saying that our particular status or our particular setting in life is we are in the dispersion. We're scattered all abound. Now, some might argue and say, well, he's not speaking to the church. He's literally speaking to Israel, who are scattered abroad. But I think that as we read this letter, it will become clear that this is not a letter simply to the Jews. This is a letter to the church. The same kind of language is going to pop up when we encounter Peter. And that letter is an epistle to the church. Now, of course, the church can contain people from all tribes and languages, and that again brings us back to the hope of the Old Testament. The goal of the Old Testament is to have one people of God through Israel, from all tribes to be the people of God. So it's not as if Israel is insignificant. That's not what we're saying. We're simply saying that because we are one people, we are the church. And so now this language is adopted by the church to refer to us. We don't replace Israel. That's not what we're saying. We're simply saying that we as the church we find our place in the greater narrative of God's redemption story. And here's what he says, greetings. And here's the way he greets. Count it all joy, my brethren, when you meet trials of various kinds. You know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Now, listen to what he said again. Count it all joy when you encounter various trials. That would be enough for us to hang our whole life on to try to achieve. But this, of course, is the way the word of the Lord comes to us, even as we are scattered, even as we live with the realization that we're not home. We're to count it all joy. Why is that? Because the testing of your faith is producing something in us, steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Now, don't you want to be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing? It's okay to say that you do. It's not a prideful thing to say that you want to be perfect and complete. Matter of factly, a healthy view of yourself should say that you desire to be your very best. And that's a God-driven desire. And here we have the way to achieve it, to count it all joy, whatever we encounter. Verse 5, if any of you lacks wisdom, is there anyone out there that lacks wisdom? Well, this verse is for you. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith, without doubting. And for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Now, because of time, let's flip over to Psalm 119. Here we go again. We get another lesson in the Hebrew alphabet. If we didn't learn it the first time, we'll get to learn it this time. Psalm 119. The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Aleph. Aleph. Let's listen to these verses. Blessed are those whose way is blameless, who walk in the law of the Lord. Blessed are those who keep his testimonies, who seek him with their whole heart, who also do no wrong, but walk in his ways. Now that sounds a lot like Psalm 1, doesn't it? Sounds a lot like Psalm 1. And that's what we're supposed to see as we read the Bible. We're attending our ways, we're mending our ways, we should say, to match his ways. And this is what the Bible calls walking in wisdom, where we take our ways and adjust them and recognize his ways.